Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. This episode of Life's Best Medicine is brought to you by the great people at Simply Snackin'. 10 flavors of beef and chicken, humanely raised, grass-fed beef, free-range chicken. And I'm excited about the 10 flavors because I'm heading off to the jungles of Guatemala on a medical trip, and I can have a new flavor every day and not get bored. I'm going to pack them in my suitcase because they're light and easy, and I could bust them out whenever I need to. So if I get stuck somewhere and everyone's eating terrible food, I could have some healthy, great snacks and still stick to my low-carb lifestyle. So thank you, Simply Snackin', for again sponsoring this episode and for bringing these important stories to the people. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I have a special guest, someone who I've been following on Twitter and really a positive guy, and he reached out to me. Andy, why don't you tell a little bit of your background and your story, and tell how you reached out and what your family's been through. I think it's really important for people to hear your story, and because I think your story will help a lot of other families out there.
Hey, Brian. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us on your podcast. We're from the UK, if anyone's struggling with our accent. I joined Twitter just over 3 years ago, and I was originally looking for guitar kind of things, but we'd also been put on, I'll jump forward a little bit, so that on the ketogenic diet for our son, Toby, who was diagnosed with epilepsy. And Twitter started to pull more towards the ketogenic side of things than it did the guitar kind of things that I was looking for. And thankfully, it opened up quite a big world of help that we were struggling with. So that's where we were 3 years ago. But prior to that, so I'm going to hand over to Hayley.
Yeah, Hayley, welcome. It's good to have you. Good to meet you finally. Good. Yeah, so tell that story of your story of how what your search was like and what happened and what you were experiencing at that time that made you seek this out.
So we've been struggling since Toby was about 2 years old with treatment for generalized childhood epilepsy. He wasn't diagnosed straight away. It's a long path that we've been on, but about 4 or 5 years into our journey, we were told about a medical ketogenic diet that could perhaps help Toby with his seizures. I'll go back and tell the story if you'd like to hear it, but we kind of got to this point where we didn't have a clue what was going on. These words were mentioned to us, and we just went straight to the internet, didn't we, to try and find out what on earth we were about to embark on. So we both work full time in the UK. Andy's a charge nurse on the emergency department at the local hospital, and I work for children's social care in the safeguarding service. So we both felt like we should have lots of information and lots of knowledge about how to treat our son with epilepsy, and we didn't. So that's why we're here. That's how we've managed to get in touch with you, and how that's all started, really.
So how about the medical community? What were you doing? Like when Toby started having seizures, what was it? A medication? Keep changing the medications, adding medications. Was anyone in the medical community saying, hey, maybe you should think about a ketogenic diet?
Not initially. No. Tom is our firstborn. Tom's 3.5 years older than Toby, dead straightforward. Then Toby came along, really happy, lively, clever little man. And when he was 2, we started to notice these sort of what we referred to at the time as like a hiccup, very short, brief pauses in his developing speech. We weren't quite sure what they were. We sought GP advice initially. that went backwards and forwards for nearly 3 years, where they were unsure of what to do with it. It was getting a little bit worse. Didn't really know what it was. And eventually, after nearly 3 years, we were referred to a paediatrician at the hospital because they suspected it could be linked to epilepsy. He was having more and more.
Yeah, they definitely got more regular, and the hiccup was lasting longer, to the point where we started to call them eyes ups.
Yeah, because
his eyes went up into the top of his head, only for initially a second, if that. But then they were getting definitely longer
and more of them, to the point where he'd probably have 40 or 50 of these episodes in a day. So at that point, the paediatrician, we went through all of the usual processes. He had an MRI scan, he had a number of EEGs, one of which was a 24-hour. So he wore the nodes on his head in school, so his friends all then knew that there was something happening for him. They were starting to see it at school as well. He was a bit different.
He started drops back as well in his learning.
And it was only then that he was sort of the diagnosis came through of childhood epilepsy, and then the medication started, and that entered a whole dark period of our lives, one that we don't ever want to go through again, really. Toby was put on typical epilepsy medication for children. You know, when you read in the news about children with epilepsy, it starts with drugs like Epilin. So smaller doses to start with.
Sodium valproate. It's the drug name, but that was the first one, and I think that's pretty much the stock drug to go to, isn't it, for kids that start with epilepsy.
So we were just told he's got typical childhood epilepsy, these absence seizures with some myoclonic jerks, could be easily treated with sodium valproate. So we started on that journey, and it didn't work. So we went back, and they said, we'll increase the dose, and that didn't work. So we went back, and they said, we'll increase the dose and we'll give you another medication alongside it. So they started to introduce other anti-epileptic medications. So I think by this point we were talking about, was it ethosuximide that came alongside that?
But with each one, as you probably know, Brian, that to work up to your therapeutic dose, certainly with epilepsy medications, it took up to 3 months sometimes to get up to the therapeutic dose that we were on. Then we'd find out that it was making his seizures worse, or it was making his behaviour worse. So then we'd have to come back down off that drug, which you can't just stop straight away. You've got to then step it back down again, which is another 2 or 3 months. So the whole thing it
went on for a really long time, and different medications were being introduced. There was, at one point, he was taking 4 different types of medication. The thing that changed the most for us is Toby's personality. Toby became very, very aggressive, and he was showing signs of depression. There were lots of outbursts where he was verbally aggressive, he was physically aggressive, he would kick out in the playground at school, something that school had never noticed before. School had never raised any issues about Toby's behaviour, even in the very early days of his diagnosis.
Hayley, how old was he at this time?
So he was diagnosed when he was just started school at 5. So he was just 5 when he was diagnosed. And then over the next sort of 2.5 to 3 years, so from up to sort of 7.5, this was this journey. So he was in his very early stages of primary school, a time where they should be playing and having a really lovely time. And what we were seeing is that Toby was becoming more and more withdrawn from his friends, or his friends were withdrawing from him. And a time where he should have been going to birthday parties and playing in the park with his friends, he wasn't able to do that. his behaviour in social settings was really poor. He didn't know what to do with himself. He was getting very, very tired very quickly. He looked zombified.
What one of the EEGs found was that he was having the seizures throughout the night as well, because he had it on for 24 hours. So he was having the seizures during his sleep, which probably, I'm guessing, probably didn't let him get into a proper sleep, because he used to wake up, and the only way you could describe his look in the morning sometimes was the typical what you see in
The Walking Dead.
It looked like something from The Walking Dead. And then we'd have to hit him with the drugs that we were told to give him, which are mainly all sedative based, as you know. So we were sending a tired boy into school having lots of small seizures with sedatives. It was awful.
On his last ambulatory EEG, it was showing that he was having about 7 seizures an hour continuously for 24 hours. So he wasn't getting, and even though those were short seizures, they weren't by any stretch significant long seizures, but they were lasting probably 5 to 10 seconds and then going up to 15 on bad days, but 7 of those an hour roughly, over a 24-hour period. And so it was
between the seizures, it was lucid for a few minutes, because I remember one day specifically he'd had a seizure. I said, just got out of bed, we were getting him ready for school. I said, quick, get your uniform on, quick, we've got a few seconds before the next one starts. So we quickly threw on his pants and got him ready for school before the next one. And then it's like, oh, stop, here we go, another one. And there we go again, and back it and do something else quickly before the next one kicked in. So he was able to do things in between. It's just that we lived in kind of 5-minute intervals.
And all of the time, sort of going back to different paediatricians and to the neurologists and other specialists within the health service, asking, and they were referring on to different people and asking for advice from different epilepsy specialists within the service. And each time it came back with, try this medication, add this medication. Each time it was, at one point they offered him Keppra. I think it's the same in America.
It's the same, yeah. That's the same, very commonly used for seizures, yes.
They offered him Keppra, but this was alongside other medications that he was on, and he was also having rescue medication as well at the time. So those we really started to see a dip in his general presentation. His pallor changed, his whole skin colour changed. He was grey, his eyes were dropping. He looked terrible, and the behaviour got worse. So we didn't stay on Keppra very long. We went back and we said, this is not good. This can't continue. So then they introduced the devil drug, as I call it, zonisamide. I don't know if you're aware. I don't know what it's
the same as, isn't it? Yeah.
So he was put onto zonisamide, and that was just horrific. He was so unwell. He was so verbally and physically abusive. He was so depressed.
And for the first time, sorry to interrupt, for the first time as well, he started to drop the seed, because up to this point, he'd not actually had what people would call a drop seizure. He'd not had any of those. If he was on his feet, he'd stay on his feet, but he'd shake a little bit. But when we started the zonisamide, I remember him in the shower one morning, and we just heard this bang, and he'd fallen and banged his head, and that had never happened. That was from starting the zonisamide.
So,
but it didn't make any difference to the amount of seizures he was having.
I think they increased. I think they were getting worse and worse during that period of time.
So none of the drugs really had an influence on the seizures. It was just more causing behavioral problems and fatigue and all this kind of stuff at that point.
Yeah, the seizures continued. They increased. They got worse in the type and the length. But Toby at 7 was starting to see the impact it was having on his life, on his friendships. being left out, and it made him really sad. And what we remember, this is really awful. I'm sorry, Toby, you're here, but and it's really hard to talk about. But there was one evening that was particularly bad. Toby had a really bad day with seizures. He'd had some outbursts already, and it kind of culminated in this huge crying tantrum outburst in the house that we really struggled to control. He was lashing out. He was really upset, but it was upset with him, and it was as if it was a kind of he
was upset with himself,
a hatred towards what he was doing and how he was behaving. And we eventually coaxed him up to his room and into bed, and we were both sat, weren't we? And we were, trying to kind of hold him tight and show him that it was okay. And then he just said, didn't he?
He told us he wanted. It is difficult to say. He told us he wanted to die, because he was either having seizures or being sedated or both,
or in trouble,
or being told off by someone at school, or getting into a fight with someone at school,
and he just, and that was it. I suppose I can't even explain the devastation in our family, in our lives, and it was really hard. We didn't talk about it with anyone. We didn't want people outside, friends and family, to know how bad things had got and how much we were struggling. It's really difficult, we hope, kind of professionals try and
part of my job as well. I've looked after thousands of kids with some form of epilepsy, and to not manage my own child with a certain amount of knowledge that I've got was just heartbreaking. It was horrible.
Yeah, we just knew then.
And I think as well with all the media platforms, the Facebooks, and everybody puts on how well everyone is and how happy they are and everything's perfect and this and that. So as well as having all this going on in the background of us, everyone else has got the perfect life, and you think, and it was even, and we know people just put it on to look so it looks good, and we know.
Yeah, I think that's an important topic too. I think that's an important topic. Well, I was thinking, how come these people have such glamorous lives? And a friend of mine once said, "Hey, you could tell the divorce is coming by how many happy pictures they put up sometimes, right?" And like they say, they got all this happy stuff, but they don't show the arguments and fight. And really, just in hearing your story, and obviously the love for your family, I saw that on Twitter, you put that on your handles, like, hey, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and these are the things that are important. And you're doing a lot in the emergency department. Being a charge nurse, that's a stressful job. So for me, all those years of being a doc at my old practice, I worked 14-hour days, but my home was my sanctuary. And I'm like, my favorite place in the world to be is where I am the least. With the people I love the most, I'm with them the least. I lived with my coworkers, right, and way more than my family. But for you, you'd come home and you had chaos at home too, and that's devastating as a parent. I mean, I could just imagine how as a dad, knowing like if your child's sick and you're trying to help them and you don't know what to do, especially when you have a medical background, like you're both saying, like you understand the system, but you still can't help your own son, and it's so frustrating.
It was awful.
It was, but we just knew it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, really, that we just need to do something. We're going to have to stand up and say something has to happen. So we made not an emergency appointment, but a quicker appointment with Toby's pediatrician, and we said, this is it. He needs to come off this medication. We've lost our boy. He isn't the boy that we know and love and we recognize anymore, and we need to do something about it before it's too late. And it was kind of that scratching head period of time, because we were saying we no longer wanted him to be on the medication, and it was like, well, what else is there? And it was only at that point, which is 3 years down the line, that someone said, it was the pediatrician, well, perhaps we could think about a ketogenic diet. It's difficult, it's tricky, it's not something that we would offer to everybody, but perhaps we could start to consider it. And we just, you had some experience.
My experience prior to doing what we do now with the ketogenic diet, my experience with it was I'd looked after maybe a handful of kids with epilepsy, but a lot of other ongoing needs. Kids that are bedbound or stuck in wheelchairs, not able to eat and drink for themselves, so they've got a pump feed directly into the stomach. And all I remember from the parents were always angry, because you could never, if you asked, oh, can we get them some, if they felt unwell or they were in pain, can we get them some paracetamol? No, you can't get this. It's got to be a certain one. I can't have this in it, and it can't have that in it. And all I remember is, with the ketogenic diet, really, really sick kids and angry parents. And that was my experience with it. Liquid fat. Yeah, lots of liquid. Well, they couldn't eat it, so that was probably an easy way of getting the fat in. But
so we left that doctor's appointment perhaps more scared than we've ever been, because we'd kind of said, this is the line in the sand, we need to stop this with the medication. But actually what was in front of us felt really daunting, really, really scary period of time. But then we were introduced to the ketogenic dietary consultant and dietitians and team at the city's children's hospital, which we didn't even know existed until that point. And we went to speak to a dietitian who is specifically for ketogenic diet therapies for children with epilepsy and other ongoing conditions. And they opened up a whole world. But I was so angry. We were both really angry, because this new world was there that just involved us changing his diet. And actually, for all of that time, they've been pumping poison into him, when really he could have just had a nice steak and some eggs and been a lot better. And that's where I think we felt at that point that we were angry at the whole medical profession. I'm sorry, but it just felt this felt like it was their last resort, but it absolutely should have been the first option that they put on the table when Toby was 4 years old. They should have said to us, take out sugar, take out carbohydrate, and see how he goes. Because since he started the diet, and I'll let Andy tell you all about the diet, but since he started the diet, we have seen an absolutely amazing turnaround. He is off all of his medication except rescue medication as and when he needs it. We're still not 100% seizure free, but we didn't expect to be. I'd say we're 75, 80% there.
Yeah, on good days, probably a lot higher than that.
But yeah, so that's when it started, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I would say as well, within a month of starting it, bear in mind we'd gone through years of hell. I'd say within a month of starting ketogenic diet, we saw a massive difference.
Yeah.
Massive difference.
And I don't know how much of it was taking away all of the medication in that first period of time, how much of it was just getting rid of all that rubbish that had been put into him, and eating better. But we certainly, over the last nearly 3 years, seen a huge improvement. He's absolutely flying at school. He's doing amazingly well. He's a fantastic footballer, and just
got 100% in his mocks.
100% in his recent maths test. So, and that was something we would never have dreamed of three and a half years ago, because he was starting to fall behind and he wasn't enjoying school.
Just going back to when we were offered the ketogenic diet and things started working, I spoke to his, we have a community consultant paediatrician who I've worked with for probably about 10 years. So he knows me really well. And I asked him why it wasn't offered first. Why is a ketogenic diet not offered as a first option? Because all you're doing is removing sugar and as many carbs as you can. And he said, oh, it's parental compliance was the word. And I thought, fair enough, if he doesn't know me, then I kind of get that. it's a massive lifestyle change. But he knows me really, really well, and he knows that I would do anything to stop the seizures.
I don't know any parents that wouldn't do absolutely anything they could to get out of that situation.
Yeah,
so
and especially the impact it has on the family and the constant stress and the worries and trying to get them ready for bed and seeing your son not, engaging, not going to birthday parties, all those things, kids not understanding at that age. I think anyone would do what they had to do. I think anyone says, hey, look, I want to help my kid. I'm willing to put him on these drugs that are making him a zombie in order to help them. And so that's the frustrating part from the medical community. I'll tell you a story that really touched me. I take care of a lot of ICU nurses trying to lose weight in low carb stuff. And they were telling me a story about a kid who was up there with intractable seizures on a ventilator for a month with seizure disorder. And one of the registered dietitians there said, maybe like all these drugs we're getting aren't working. Maybe we try a ketogenic diet. They put the kid on ketogenic tube feeds and seizures stop. They get him up on the wards again.
Wow.
No seizures for a little while. Boom, seizures start again. Why? They gave him orange juice and cereal for breakfast, right? Then like no common sense. They said, well, we want him to enjoy his life. And we want, it's like, enjoy his life. He's seizing constantly for a month on a ventilator. Like seriously. I mean, to me, it's like, it's child abuse, right? It's just like insane to me that I think if we're at least given the option, because some of these treatments, when you make your child a zombie, you're trying to help them and they get worse and they can't interact and they're don't want to live anymore. And no one says, you know what, guys, this is not working. Let's change what we're doing and change the diet. So, and I have a question going back. What was his typical diet like when he was seizing all the time before you made a dietary change?
I remember, so basically his breakfast was breakfast cereals.
Usually
Weetabix or Cocoa Pops, one of the, what did you have?
Yeah, he'd have breakfast cereal in the morning.
But I remember speaking to his consultant and I said, and his epilepsy nurse it was, and I said to him, I've noticed about 30 minutes after he's had his breakfast, his seizures increase. And we didn't know anything about keto at that point. And I didn't know that sugar could cause this problem. So he said, all right, we'll pop it in his notes. And that was it. And then I kept just a mental log of what that. Yeah. And I noticed that when he woke up and he had his breakfast cereal, shortly after, most of the time the seizures got worse.
He just had a typical diet. He'd have breakfast cereal before school, he'd take sandwich, and he'd eat fruit and vegetables, but not lots. He enjoyed just general food.
Pizzas.
We'd eat pasta, rice, all of the things now that are just not even in the house. But he would eat all of those things, and we thought he had a healthy diet. We did the eat well plate, pretty much that was what we were doing. So we didn't think anything of it really. He wasn't a child that had eat lots of sweets or chocolate. He was, he ate crisps, snacks and things. Yeah. But he did we've just completely flipped that on his head. It's completely different. We thought we were looking after him and giving him a healthy diet, and it turns out that was probably what was causing the majority of the seizures.
And obviously you guys have family stress, you have all this stuff going on, obviously it puts stress on the marriage. When you started switching his diet, were you both all in saying, look, we got to make this change? And I'm sure Toby wasn't really thrilled about that.
Yeah, well.
He actually really, really enjoys the food that he eats now. So it hasn't been as hard as I've read. Obviously, I've joined lots of social media groups, and lots of families struggle to get the children to eat the things that are put in front of them for ketogenic diet. Toby hasn't, thankfully. He's been absolutely amazing. It was hard for me because obviously I do the majority of the cooking in the house, and I work full time, and I was thinking, how on earth am I going to do this? How on earth am I going to weigh and measure ingredients and make food from scratch? And how am I going to do this and add all of these things in that they want me to add in? Because we had this table of things that he needed to eat each day, no more than 12 grams of carbohydrate, 150 grams of fat, no more than 60 grams of protein, reading packets and looking at things. I thought, how on earth am I going to do it? And
there was a lot of maths involved at the beginning.
There's tables.
You kind of get used to what 30 grams of cheese looks like, or you kind of get used to the measurements, but things have kind of relaxed a little bit.
It certainly has. It certainly has relaxed. And although Toby's on a medical ketogenic diet, the house has just sort of gone more towards just a low carb diet, all of us. So rather than worrying about the weights and measurements, let's just eat good food that we all enjoy and take out all of the processed nonsense and just eat well. So the maths element to it has gone away over the last 3 years, but we've got a pretty good idea of how to keep him in ketosis, the types of things that tip him out. Some things with added sweeteners and things like that can really cause havoc. So we avoid those false sweeteners.
It was Vinny, sorry to interrupt again. It was Vinny that kind of made it twig for me, where Vinny got in contact with me via Twitter when I put something on about Toby playing the guitar.
Vinny Tortridge?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You're going to give him more of an ego, man.
I know. Yeah, don't tell him.
No, I'll tell him. He'll be happy to hear that, because, you know, he's done a lot for the community. He's been a really, he's helped me out a lot. He's a good guy. Yeah,
he is. Yeah, he was great. And he kind of reached out to me, and because he knows the film producer, First Do No Harm, the film that changed us as well. But,
I've seen that.
Yeah, that was pretty much us.
Yeah, that was us, basically.
We just sat crying for 2 hours watching that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vinny just said, just because of his NSNG, no sugar, no grains, and we were trying to work everything out like that. And I know we have to hit a certain target of fat and that, but just for ease, just to make things easier, just don't have sugar, don't have grains, keep your carbohydrates as low as you can. That was, and I was like, and when that sank in, I was like, now I get it, right? So instead of buying chicken that's covered in breadcrumbs and all sorts of fancy stuff, just buy a chicken, or just buy steak, and just buy eggs, and keep things really simple. And it was Vinny that kind of, for me anyway, that was my wake-up call.
Yeah, I think that's the brilliance of Vinny, is that he said, look, let's make it simple. You don't have to make it so complicated. Just figure out, take out the, I mean, I think this is what makes me frustrated, because, you know, obviously I'm with Low Carb MD and we talk about low carb stuff. Okay, great. So people say, well, you just have one trick. Do you think that's the only thing? Not really. I mean, there's certain people who are pro athletes that are running, you know, miles every day, and they can get away with more carbohydrates. But someone with seizure disorder, or someone with diabetes, or someone with other health conditions, attention deficit disorder, we have a disaster with that. How many kids could be influenced by saying, let's cut out some of the processed garbage, right? And in Toby's case, he's going to need more fat than the rest of the family needs. So you just add stuff to his food, and then you're not cooking 20 different meals for everyone. And so I've seen that in families where they say, well, mom and dad are doing great, their diabetes is getting better on low carb, but we don't want our kids to have to do that. So I'm making 5 meals a day so everyone can have their own thing. It's like, well, gosh, you know, just get rid of the processed stuff as much as possible, and then you don't have to make it crazy.
It is. And
that's what we've been able to do over. It's took time, and it's taken support from the sort of social media community. We're registered with a couple of charities in the UK, which have been absolutely amazing, providing recipes and help. And, you know, one of the hardest things has been for it to have the least impact on Toby's life, so that he can go to birthday parties, and he can go to a football tournament and take a packed lunch with him. So he can, you know, eat his lunch in front of other people in school without feeling different. And that's one of the things that we really struggled with initially. He's not bothered anymore. It's absolutely fine. But initially we needed that support, and there was charities that have been able to do that have sent us recipes for certain things, and how to make child-friendly food good for you, so without using all the processed rubbish. So that Daisy Garland and Matthew's friends.
We just interviewed, and we'll put links to all those for people so that they know where to get, because it's so important. That's great that you all your suffering and all you went through to get here, because I know Maria Emmerich is coming up with a cookbook that's for kids, right? For fun stuff you can make that's low carb, and so it's hard to be the only one. I do the same thing. So Toby's been joining us in and out. He's a footballer. He doesn't want to be too famous, but he's a pretty cool guy. We got to talk a little bit before this, and so but I think his story is very helpful for other kids out there suffering to know they're not the only one. And when you feel like you're the only family going through this, it's hard. But when you can go to and say, hey, I can go to the birthday party and I'll eat. That's what I have to. Toby, I'm in the same boat, man. I bring my own appetizers, my own stuff too. But luckily, the good news for you is a lot of places are starting to understand that. So they have options, even if you go out to dinner, where they can make it a special meal for you, where you don't have to have all that and all the processed stuff with it. So, and look how healthy you are too. And that's the other thing. You look fantastic, good smile. I think you got a dimple there. If I saw that. Yeah. It's on the wrong side. I only have one. Do you only have one or you have two?
Yeah.
You guys got to see the video. If not, just that side. I only have one on my left side. You got it on your right side. So we should hang out. We'll be even. That's all good. Yeah.
Now, Brian, is that when we have steak for dinner, Toby, if I don't eat mine quick enough, Toby's on it. He'll eat mine too. He's like Sean Baker.
Yeah, Sean Baker or Ben Bakikio, my friend. He's in his 70s, and he's a beast workout guy. And he was like, "Are you done with that steak? Are you gonna eat that fat?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Ben, how do you do it?" But you see that because they're so lean and fit. And look at him, he's so lean. People have said for years, if you eat fat, the kid's gonna get fat. Well, clearly he's a footballer and he's fit and looks fantastic, right? So how did the diet change affect the rest of the family? I mean, how did you both notice health differences and things like that along changing your diet?
Massive health differences. I was diagnosed with spondyloarthropathy, so psoriatic arthritis, when I was 30, and spent basically 10 years with really bad psoriasis, aching hips, knees, ankles, the wrists. It just progressively got worse over 10 years. And I was gaining weight, but I didn't realize I was gaining. I don't think either of us realized.
No, it took a photograph, didn't it?
Yeah, there was a photograph. It's like, oh. But my joints were just hurting. Some days were bad enough that I couldn't even dress myself. You had to put my socks on one day. I couldn't lift my leg up to put my sock on. I couldn't reach down because my back hurt. So when we started doing the ketogenic diet, the weight loss was that happened anyway, but we weren't doing it for that. But then I just noticed my skin felt better because I wanted to scratch it off with sandpaper originally. My skin felt better. I didn't have the flare-ups, and then the pain started to go away. And like now I have no pain unless I have a beer. But we don't have a lot of that.
Yeah. No, it's what's funny? I'll tell you, that's true. As a matter of fact, I have a med student with me. He's from Taiwan. He just graduated from med school. He's skinny arms and legs, but he would get a beer belly and he couldn't get rid of it. And he was working out and he didn't drink beer, but he ate a lot of just culturally, noodles and rice and desserts and things like that. And he couldn't get rid of it. He went keto. He went carnivore, actually, high fat carnivore. His for 10 years, he went to doctors with eczema all over his body. He said it was maddening, like he couldn't sleep and it was affecting his life. And he said within a week or two, it was gone, completely gone, just changing his diet. So people don't realize, especially with psoriasis and these autoimmune type things, how much of an impact lifestyle change can make.
IBS.
Yeah, and you
IBS and migraine as well.
You suffered with that for years as well, didn't you? And then that's gone as well. Headache.
IBS and migraines gone. See, those kind of things, like these are just side effects of and it makes me crazy because I feel silly as a low carb doctor because people say I have this. Oh yeah, low carb will help that. My friends tease me. They go, if I break my leg, you're going to tell me low carb, right? Because you think it works for everything. But
I get
right. What was that?
I get the same thing at work when people behave. Oh, I've got this. I've got that. This is wrong. This is wrong. Have you tried low carb? Have you tried? Oh, is that your answer for everything? Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy though when you see it working. You think, well, it's working. I'll try it for all these different things. And what we were saying, kind of like what you were saying, is the side effect. Like I'm treating diabetes and obesity and all that kind of stuff, and I see these people happier, and they say, I quit drinking. I'm not smoking anymore, and I'm not stressed. I'm not fighting with people anymore. And you hear this, and you think, this is insane. When I first started doing this, as a matter of fact, you probably heard it on the podcast, on the Low Carb MD podcast. is we started noticing people with addiction problems getting better. And we said, we're seeing this. We don't know why it's happening, but it's happening. Sean Baker with depression, anxiety, stress, all this stuff they're seeing as carnivores. I was thinking there's something to this. I just don't know what it is, but there's something, and it may have to do with visceral fat and hormones and all these other kind of things that we don't even think about. But when you see it, you can't deny it anymore. And I think that's one of the problems is you can't unsee what you've seen. So now what you've seen, you know, with your son, you say, well, gosh, if you're suffering, try it at least and see if it makes a difference. It's not going to hurt you to cut out processed food and garbage stuff.
You can't lose out by eating proper food, eating real food.
It's kind of far-reaching now as well, because obviously for 3 years, Andy's been like a one-man mission for low carb, telling everybody.
They bought me that at work.
Yeah, warning, they start talking about keto. Man, I need a cup too. That's my, like, yeah, they look at me, like, it will be out somewhere. So, hey, tell me about keto. And I'm like, I look at my wife like, how much time do we have? Right? Because it's hard, because you see it and you want to help someone. It's just like faith or whatever works for you, or yoga or something that, you know, a certain workout that's changed your life. You want to share because you want to help people. And it's hard because, you know, not everyone wants to hear it. They don't want to make those changes. And I think, you know, the big thing I get from you that's so frustrating is they never gave you the option of saying, is this too hard for you? Do you want to try it at least? Like, how is that? And I've talked to so many families where they said, no one ever like I see it all the time with diabetes. Like, no one told you to stop drinking 8 sodas a day. Like, no one during this whole time, as they escalated your drugs, no one said, hey, what are you doing? What are you eating? Like, never once. And they've been on insulin for 15 years and no one said, hey, within 2 weeks they're off insulin. It's like, it's insane. It's really insane to me. Like, you can't imagine.
I say that at work since this coronavirus has happened, we've seen a massive increase in kids coming in with in DKA. So brand new kids, diabetic kids. And the way that the medics kind of plan it is, after we've got them out of DK and we've got them safe, and they have to learn how to manage the diabetes. They're looking at it from the wrong angle. To me, the wrong angle. They're looking at it from insulin point of view rather than a glucose point of view, because the glucose is going to be there anyway. Your liver still produces that glucose, but they just seem to want to give not a high glucose diet, but a high moderate carbohydrate diet to keep the blood glucose up. And
it's already high. That's why they're there. For people who don't know, DK is diabetic ketoacidosis, right? Yeah. So it happens when you don't make insulin anymore because you've overwhelmed your system with sugar. Your pancreas shuts down. And insulin plays 2 roles. One, it gets rid of the sugar, but it also shuts down the liver from releasing a bunch of sugar. So when you lose the brakes, your freight train is out of control and you can't stop it. And that's what we're seeing. And so sometimes initially we have insulin to lower the sugars down so the pancreas can start working again. But what happens is, even when the pancreas starts working again, they keep giving you a bunch of sugar. So you keep needing insulin to get rid of the extra sugar you're giving the person. And that's why it makes us doctors crazy who understand this. This is why we can't unsee what we've seen. And that's why when Andy's at work and says stuff, because I know for a couple of years, at least, people are starting to get it more now. But I would tease the hospital. I said, you know what's amazing? When my people come to you, they're not on insulin. When they leave, they're on insulin. How does that happen? You guys are magically doing that. Why? They give them carbs all day long, right? Every meal they're getting carbs, and they shoot up insulin to get rid of the carbs. And you think, and people who get it look and say, what? Once you see it, it's like one of those pictures that is blurry, and then it comes into focus. And then other people just see the blurry picture all the time. They don't understand what you're saying, and they think you're crazy because they know that you have to give carbs with each meal, even though the sugar's 300. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
No,
but
absolutely not. But just as another sort of success story, my dad has been type 2 diabetic for about 12 years. Always just below that brink where he needs insulin, but he's on a lot of medication and has been for a long time. It took us a while. It took a lot of badgering from Andy and sort of trying to encourage him to start.
I can do this. I can do this. I can change it. I've listened to Brian on that podcast.
Yeah. And so a year last November, he started a low carb diet and has been stuck to it, didn't he?
Yeah.
And within 11 months, he was you can explain it better.
Yeah, his HbA1c came down from, I think it said it was 65.
That's our. Yeah, it
might be a different measurement in the US. 65 to, I think, I want to say 40.
40. He was pre-diabetic, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. And these are just like anecdotal, like here's the side things. Like he came off his meds and his sugars are better. And it's like, it's like these are things that we're frontline trying to treat. So what Toby's done is amazing. I mean, just looking at him moving around and having fun and smiling, and it's pretty awesome. Hey, Toby, do you have any messages for kids out there who kind of have seizures or no?
How many messages for the ketogenic diet?
Well, can you tell me? Is it hard? This guy's shy. He doesn't want to be famous and have to sign his autograph to everyone. So I get it, man. You want to be, you have your private life. So everyone promises not to ask for your autograph for sure. But like, is there anything you could say that you would help a kid that was, after what you've been through and changing your diet? Anything you could tell a kid out there who's thinking about changing, or a parent who wants to change what their child is eating?
Please try the ketogenic diet.
At least try.
A bit louder.
Louder. At least try. Yeah.
At least try.
Yeah.
At least try.
It's okay, isn't it? It's fine. We still manage. You still, no real change to your life, really, has there? And even he's seen it in himself. I know he's shy, doesn't want to talk today, but he's definitely seen it in himself. He knows, and I think him being able to see how different he is has helped with his ability to stick with it. And we don't have any, he doesn't kick back against us. He eats what we give him. He knows that it's doing him good. And I think him being able to see that in himself and how much better he is has helped, because, I was worried, how on earth am I going to, keep him from going to these parties at McDonald's and things like that, but he's done it because he knows how well he is and he knows how much better he is. So
what does he do in those situations? Do you pack him his own lunch that he has while everyone else is eating? Like, he doesn't eat the hamburger by itself or anything like that?
Yeah.
A burger, meat, and a lettuce.
And then we'll top it up with other stuff. But we manage, we work it out. It's fine.
Figure it out. And see, that's the thing that's always kind of troubled me too, with the, with kids now fighting obesity and diabetes and all that stuff. The parent says, well, I don't want them to feel unusual. Well, guess what? Weighing 300 pounds when you're 12, they're going to feel unusual. So it's something you have to make a change and go, look, we have to intervene from a health perspective, right? And the mental focus and mood. And there's a lot of studies coming out that are overwhelming. A few docs and psychiatrists are saying, look, the more obesity you have as a kid, the more likely you are to have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, major depression, anxiety. And everyone thought it was because they stood out and were different, but really it's the reality is that they were having biochemical problems.
Yeah, definitely.
Believe that. Absolutely can believe that. Yeah.
Even if you compare him to some of the kids in his class, some of the, we've been in lockdown for 12 months pretty much where we are, and we've recently seen one or two of the kids at the local park, and even just in 12 months I've noticed a few of the kids have got really big. I mean, no exercise isn't doing anybody any good, but we just know that the diet that they'll be having at home to kind of, and in inverted commas, compensate for the lack of, for not being able to go out and play with their friends. The parents will just, we'll get takeaway, or we'll get pizza in, and we'll make things.
That's changed, hasn't it? That's definitely changed for us. Previously, going out for a meal or having a takeout was a treat. That's not a treat anymore. Treats are different now. We go out somewhere, we do something, we go somewhere. It's not, we've sort of flipped that around as well, because previously, it was, you've done really good in school, let's order pizza, and now that's not that, it's, we do something completely different.
Heck, you get a steak, man. I'd rather have a steak than pizza. You got a good deal going there, Toby, man. You're pretty stoked. Yeah. So it's that kind of stuff where you get to eat real food, and the effects on longevity, the effects on mental focus, and attention deficit disorder, which we have an epidemic of. It's absolutely stunning that the counselors in the school and people out there aren't saying, hey, let's try getting rid of some of this processed food and soda and orange juice and toast and French fries and all those and crisps, right? And so when you see that, it's so frustrating, because I've seen kids, as a side effect of mom and dad getting healthier, now that they're saying, the teachers say my son is so much more focused in class, or on Zoom, and they're doing stuff, and I think that this is a big thing for our society. What you're bringing to light is this, that the parents are gaining weight, the kids are gaining weight, they're sitting in their house, they're scared, they're not exercising. Like, you know, when I was Toby's age, I'd be out playing football myself until, you know, it was dark and they made me come home, right? And so that, you know, just being isolated from other kids and, you know, all those kind of things, it really has an impact for sure. And it's hard on the family. And, you know, we're seeing alcohol abuse going up, spousal abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, you know, depression, anxiety, stress, dementia getting worse, all those things by where we are. And it's really hard. It's hard to see. But the good news is, you know, you're taking care of yourselves, you know, physically, emotionally. And I think that people don't realize the toll emotionally of having a child who's ill and you can't get help. You know, that is such a huge thing.
Yeah, definitely. We had a child came into our resuscitation area. He had epilepsy and he was in status. And I was talking to mum once we'd got him out of status, and he was all right in the end. I was chatting to mum and I said, my little boy has epilepsy, and she just started crying because I don't know about her home life, and it appeared that she didn't have much support. So I just started discussing how Toby is and what it's like to be a parent of someone who has a kiddie with epilepsy. And this poor mum just completely broke down because she'd never spoke about it before. She'd not got any help off anyone or not been offered any help. So I gave her a few charities to the Daisy Garland and that to look at. But it was the first time that I think she'd spoken about how hard it is. Yeah. And like I said before about being on Twitter and on Facebook and everything's happy and it's just not.
And it's not for some people.
Not all the time.
And I think part of that as well is you think you're getting help. You go to your pediatrician, you go to your GP, you go to neurologists and specialists all over the place, and you think you're getting help, and actually we weren't at that point. And that, I think that's, for me, I just think if I can just let people know at that really early stage that it's actually just make some dietary changes and help yourself see some different. I'm not saying that every child won't need medication of some sort, but actually just give it a try, because it's just, you know, it's the difference that we've seen and we're seeing with all the community that we surround ourselves with now, and people trying low carb and other children.
All our friends are doing it as well. Our friends have all lost weight.
Yeah, that's what happens. I mean, everyone wants to legislate this thing, and I think what's happening is you're an example. You go out, Toby's an example to the other kids. They're going to look at him and go, "Oh my goodness, look how fit he is! Look how fast he runs! Look how good he's doing at school, or well he's doing at school." And so you start realizing there's ripple effects from this, because in medicine, the crazy part is if I tell a doctor Toby's story and your story, he'll say that's an anecdote. That's just an anecdote. I go, I have thousands of anecdotes. All these anecdotes are alive. Toby's life matters, right? And it's important. So I think a lot of times when we are, you know, we're easy to dismiss things, say, look, everything we're doing is not working. We have to change what we're doing. And I think with diabetes and obesity and hypertension and all this stuff, say, look, make some changes and see what happens. Some people aren't going to stick to it. So, you know, Toby may, when he's a, you know, older teen, say, forget it. And it happens with type 1 diabetics, for instance. They go off the rails and say, I'm going to eat cookies and donuts like all the other kids. And then they have health implications, and then they're on tons of insulin. Then they've committed their life to a different track than saying, look, let me take control of this, whether it's alcohol or whatever, smoking, whatever it is. There's that too. And when people understand the implications, my friends with seizure disorder that I talked to, seizure salad being one of them, I said, do you ever cheat? She said, no way. It's not worth it, because I'll lose my license. I can't drive and I'm miserable. Like, why? And she went from 318 pounds on all those meds down to 120 pounds or something ridiculous, fit and active, right? On a high fat ketogenic diet.
Yeah, and
she's ripped now. Have you seen her?
Yeah, she's crazy. Yeah, she's great. I love her. Yeah, she's a testament. But she had the same thing. Her doctors offered her brain surgery instead of saying ketogenic. They said ketogenic diet's too risky, so we'll give you a 60% chance of improvement with brain surgery. It's like, well, I'd rather change my diet and see what happens.
Yeah, they offered it to us. They said they were considering VNS surgery for Toby before they even mentioned changing his diet. So yeah,
that was mentioned first. The brain surgery was mentioned first.
Yeah, the brain surgery is mentioned first before making a dietary change, because it might be too restrictive for some families. Like, really, if I can help my kid, I'll be as restrictive as I have to be, right? Because he can have a normal life and be like he is now.
Yeah,
and
I don't think it's that restrictive, to be fair. I don't think it's...
I think it's daunting to start with, but once you get into it, and like you say, if your whole family's doing it and you're not having to make all of these different meals, and it's, you know, you can very quickly get into the right habits, and it's not scary.
And everybody used to eat this way years ago. So kind of, I'm 45 now, yeah. So my grandparents, so my grandparents used to, and our grandparents used to eat like this all the time, because they didn't have a fridge freezer to stick all the pizzas in and keep it. So they were buying fresh food every other day. Or there was.
And I know if you're like Ireland, I don't remember the UK, but I know in Ireland their freezers are this tiny little thing, and us Americans look and go, how do you live with that? Because Americans, obviously, we just have a huge 5 freezers in our house, and we have all this, you know. Luckily, a lot of people now are using meat in there rather than frozen dinners and frozen pizzas. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people, because of the hectic life, like both of you working full. Because for me, man, I seriously, like when my youngest was born, she was blue, and they thought she might have a hole in her heart. She has this, and it was all fixable stuff. But the feeling of hopelessness and devastation, like, oh my goodness, this is like serious stuff. Like, and it turned out to be not overreacted. But you know, when you have a child, there's nothing worse than having a child sick or going through stuff, like, because you want to take it all on yourself and help them, and it's so hard. And I'm sure it had, like we talked about, like conflict in the like frustration when you're on edge all the time and you can't sleep and you're worried. And so how has life changed for you since Toby changed his diet and you've changed your diet? How do you see it?
It's great. I don't have any pain anymore.
So he's not grumpy.
Apart from when I've had the beer, like I said. But
so his mood's better.
I'm happy now, because I was horrible. The constant pain of the backache and the hips, and I couldn't stand up. And then when I eventually stood up, I couldn't sit back down again, because that hurt. That's gone. That has completely gone. The psoriasis flares up sometimes if I get with the stress, but it's nowhere near at the level it was.
No, the house is definitely.
But we're a happy house now, I'd say.
Yes, definitely calmer, definitely. And like I said right at the beginning, those sort of social situations where you want to go out for the day with your friends, we really struggled with that before with Toby, because it was either medication induced issues, or we had to be back for, he needed medication for this, or he was tired and he was sleepy, or he was aggressive and grumpy. Whereas now we don't even think about that. He's just in the car with his football, off we go. And life in that way is a lot easier. We take packed lunches, we take bits of snacks that he's allowed to have with us wherever we go, just in case. We've learned all the tricks from all the various restaurants and things that we need to do. And they are fantastic. In our experience, they've all been brilliant. Yeah, everywhere we've been, they've made changes. We've just told them, and they've said, "Oh right, brilliant. Yeah, we can do this."
We're now that annoying family on Facebook who's got the perfect life.
I feel like
yeah, exactly right. Is that right? Yeah.
That's us now, yeah.
Well, I know the truth. That's why I don't post a lot of that kind of stuff, right? But yeah, it's true though. But it's life. You go through life. But I think just I can feel the obviously the love, the love and the that you worked hard as a family to figure out a solution to the problem. And a lot of people just don't have the bandwidth or the connection like you had. That one person had to say, "Hey, why don't we try this?" Because you see where your road would be without making the life change for all of you, for your whole family. It's incredible.
I don't want to think about that. I mean, he's a big lad now as well, and he's strong. And
we wouldn't have been able to manage.
I wouldn't have been able to manage the outbursts and the. I mean, he would fall asleep anywhere, and we would have to carry him. And it would, there was all of those times where there's just no way I'd be able to manage.
Especially with psoriatic arthritis and your back's hurting and you got to pick up the kid. And when my kids got to a certain age, it's like, okay, you're on your own. I'm gonna wake you up and get you upstairs. That's it, man. I'm not carrying you anymore, right? So it's awesome. Hey, thank you so much for sharing. This is really important. And part of this podcast, I always like to say, hey, what's life's best medicine for you? Like, what did you turn when things were at the worst? How did you get through it? Like, what got you to take another step and say, okay, we're gonna do this? Where do you lean on your strength and your faith and or whatever it is that gets you to keep moving forward?
I would say the four of, I mean, Tommy's not here now, but the four of us,
our unit, just our family,
us four together, it's definitely brought us closer together. And we're a team, aren't we?
Yeah, we just kind of looked at each other and we knew that things had to change, and we've stuck together and we've done it together, all of us. It's been our whole journey. There's been no fighting against it. It's just been, we all knew, and you know, this is the most important thing. I mean, we call ourselves Team Reynolds because we are a team, you know. It's the four of us and the dog, of course. And it was just that, because tensions at times, it was horrific, you know. And so
even our parents didn't know, probably they don't know how bad it got.
Because it was our problem.
You keep it private. I mean, it's the same thing in abusive families or alcoholic families, and all the people don't know, and they're like, "What? He was a drunk all the time? I didn't know he was abusive at home." Like, because people don't talk about that. It's the elephant in the room that people just ignore, right? And I think that's so important to especially when you both have stressful jobs, you'll be able to come home and say, okay, I'm gonna have peace tonight, and we can sit at the dinner table and enjoy each other's, you know, instead of having conflict and fights and all that stuff. It does, and I can see the smiles and the connection. I see Team Reynolds here. I saw that was the first thing. I'm like, yeah, it's a team, and you realize you all band together. And you know, and maybe just briefly in closing, how did Tommy deal with all this? Was this like, did he feel like he was the lost child at points? And I
mean,
he kind of, I wouldn't say he doesn't get left out.
No, he really
doesn't get left out. He doesn't do he's not down to ketogenic levels of low carb, but he definitely does. Well. He eats well. The one thing we can't get him to stop eating is his breakfast cereals, and it drives us mad.
And we keep telling him, but he just still does it. But other than that, he does really well.
He's no problem.
In terms of, I mean, he's the oldest, and he's got a really loving relationship with Toby, and he's always looked out for him. And it's just nice now to see them playing football together, or, you know, playing on their computer games together, and they can interact and they can play as brothers should. And Tom's been absolutely fantastic and supports him. He's a shining star on his own. So, you know, he's doing absolutely fantastically well. But he's been a rock, really, hasn't he? He's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's so important, because that's, you know, there's a bond between brothers that's a different type of bond. And when you have a brother who can't function, or he's lashing out at you, and like, you know, you want to love him and help him, but you can't. And I imagine that must have been difficult for him. And also, you know, kids made fun of him and he came home sad, and you're trying to help him and he's mad at you and the world. It's got to be it takes a toll. And I've seen that in families where, you know, one child has special needs or is going through difficulties, or even with drug addiction, you know, and the other family members, like, you never pay attention to us. All you do is focus on him all the time, or her all the time, you know, and that sometimes that can be hard, but
it really is, and it's something we've been really quite conscious of, to not do that. Obviously, at the worst of times, you know, Tommy probably was pushed to the side a little bit, but to protect him and to shelter him to an extent. But he's been really understanding, and, you know, he is. He would say himself just how much of a difference, and I'll let him tell you how much of a difference.
Dude. You're tall, man. Tom, nice to meet you. I'm Brian. Everyone, meet Tom.
Yeah. So we were just saying, Tom, what impact has it had on
and how much of a rock you've been looking after him. Yeah.
And
taking care of brother, bonding and doing that. It's hard, man. That's a hard thing to go through when you're growing up, and, you know, not being the total focus sometimes. But, you know, as a family pulling together, I think that's a huge, you know, the importance of family. That's one thing I talk about on this podcast, and you embody that, right? You may not have the happy pictures and all this stuff on Facebook all the time, but when you have that connection, that bond, and you guys say, look, we're in this together, you know, we'll fight through this. And, you know, that in itself is a huge story, right? Because a lot of families are just decimated these days, and people don't talk, they don't interact. And so sometimes I think it's the craziest life is. And for me, people say, well, you know, why does this happen? And why does bad things happen to good people? And when you see the long trajectory, now you look back at those times, you think, man, that brought us together and made us stronger.
That's a conversation we had on a walk the other evening, that, you know, that actually it has, hasn't it?
Yeah,
it really has.
And if it, and
as
it,
bad
and it
as it
sounds
all was.
as bad as it all, yeah, and everything we've gone through, like my psoriasis and my arthritis wouldn't have cleared up. His epilepsy wouldn't have cleared up. Your dad wouldn't have got rid of his type 2 diabetes. We haven't mentioned that we've all lost weight. It's had such a massive impact on us. From what is a bad thing, but we've stuck together through it.
It's been brilliant, hasn't it?
Yeah, my diagnosis for Tom is he's okay having a little cereal here and there, man. The guy looks fantastic. I mean, you're I'm jealous of him for sure, right? But do what your parents say. Don't listen to me. But keep playing sports and getting out there and doing stuff. And but I think this is so great. It's such a huge thing. I think a lot of families really need to hear about your family and what you've been through and what got you through it and bonded together. And I think this is life's best medicine, really, when you have a family who loves each other and you're there for each other and supporting each other through the hard times. And so anything you all want to close this with, any words of wisdom you have for our listeners today?
No, Toby, nothing.
I think the smile's good enough, man. That tells us something.
I
would say stick together. If you're struggling, stick together and reach out for help. Ask for help. That would be my one. Even if it's on Twitter or wherever, ask for help.
Yeah. Somebody else is going through it and somebody else is winning at it. So just, look and, anyone wants to get hold of us for any advice, not that we're like
no
gurus.
We're not gurus like you guys, but if anybody wants to reach out, my Twitter handle's OIT Andy. I'm more than happy to help anybody.
Just chat about it.
Or just chat. Yeah.
And Andy, you have my email. Send me your links of charities that have helped out people that have really been an impact, because I want to get the word out so if people are searching that you've done the hard work for them, and then they can start reaching out and getting on the right track, because you guys are doing a fantastic job. And everyone listening, thank you for listening. This is life's best medicine. I think really the importance of a mom and dad who care, a big brother who cares, having resources out there. And like Andy said, I can't tell you the impact of when you see someone struggling, say, I've had that struggle. I've struggled with alcohol. I've struggled with drugs. So being able to be real with people and share your scars and share what you've been through on your journey, because there's someone out there who needs to hear this story. And I know a lot of people need to hear this story. And so please share it with your friends and family if they're struggling with these things that we've talked about. And also, I think, just really being kind to yourself, being kind to others, and, finding how to make your house more peaceful and prosperous, and that there's a love bond and all that stuff. So many of us are missing out on that, especially now with the stress of everything going on. So this is why I did the podcast, for stories like this. This is critical. And I think this will help a lot of people. So all the Reynolds, thanks Team Reynolds. Thank you for reaching out and for having the, being able to share all this stuff that you couldn't even share back then, but now you're sharing it. So it's really great stuff.
Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining me. And everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Thank you for sticking with us. This is important stuff, and I know it's going to help a day and a great week. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.